thanking its existence and worshipping this higher intelligent being that has endowed us with these, possibilities and opportunities and this beauty around us. Really, I come from a rugged individualistic perspective, in which you are given this opportunity, make something of it, find purpose. Perhaps there's some intrinsic purpose that you must seek out, but if anything, you can't just exist on the intrinsic. You must make something and take action for yourself and make decisions for yourself. And so in that sense, I say, make life beautiful. You're given one opportunity, make life beautiful. And one thing that I do enjoy about religious doctrine are the morality and the values that it imparts upon the individuals that decide to subscribe to it. And that I don't believe is a necessity for life, but I do believe that it benefits you if you do abide and stick to those. And so in that sense, I derive from religious doctrine what is useful for me, but I allow myself to be an independent, free individual.
Do you think that would work? Like, let's just say we extrapolate that. Do you think that would be kind of the right ingredient for a society when everybody is thinking individualistically in terms of, for example, where they derive their morality? I guess that's the problem that we're seeing in society now, because it's gone too far that people have, there's no real moral compass. And I guess I was looking into this as well, because quite a few people make this argument, and I thought, it's definitely worth looking into. And it's that if we're too open, there's no kind of direction, there's nothing that will kind of hone us in. And I guess because a necessary being, or God, has created us, there are certain truths. For example, you're 100% right, there are certain things that we can probably derive from our surroundings. We know not to hurt somebody and to be kind and all this, but I would argue that there are certain things that you actually can't posit universally, and those things, if left to our own devices, it's quite detrimental. For example, even if you look at the argument of abortion and stuff like that, people become very passionate about that. And I'm not sure if you heard, just a few weeks ago, there was a case of a woman, I think she aborted a child after, 3 months. So in this country it's illegal. So she was obviously she was, taken by the authorities, but there was a big march saying, no, she should still be allowed to do that. So how would you say, in your worldview, would you kind of draw boundaries with regards to stuff like that, conundrums like that?
I don't believe in policing individuals' decisions as long as they aren't legally binding. But equally, when it comes to your own self, you are your own master. You do as you please. Now, the fact that child had no consciousness means that this woman still had the power to do as she pleases. Now, legally, it wasn't right, but I believe that she was in her right to. If this was not right for her, why bring that child into this world? She would have been a terrible mother. She spared that child something, but she's being ostracized for it, for better or for worse. Perhaps she realized a bit too late, or perhaps she isn't being intentionally cruel. Then perhaps she should be punished for what she did. But then again, no, because it is her own body. You do as you please.
Interesting.
Back in the day, you couldn't commit suicide because it would have been illegal to commit suicide. I know. I think it's like the 18th century. How pointless, how brilliantly pointless. Do as you please. If in fact you're probably sparing the world. If this is how you feel, do what you need to do.
What if that results in the oppression of minorities? But because I'm pretty sure you're kind of going towards the greatest good for the greatest number.
The greatest good for yourself, really.
What if the greatest good to thyself is harming another individual?
That's never really the case. If anything, that's the delusion of the mind. That's a mental illness.
But let's just say you're in a ring and quote unquote is legal and you're harming the other person, but it's done according to the rules. But it gives you joy. Like, for example, gladiators. They would be thrown into the ring. People would derive pleasure from it. There would be a law saying that it's okay you would say that it's a cancer of the mind or it's a disease of the mind. But how would you get that across to the people that are convinced that no, it's fine because we're deriving pleasure from it?
The gladiator chose that for themselves. I mean, I have also heard of prisoners being forced into that, but I assume that that's society's version of punishment. Every society will have their own take. But if in the gladiator's case, that is a choice. They chose that whatever happens to them, they've agreed. They sort of.
I don't think they had a choice.
The gladiators?
Yeah, they didn't have a choice.
Perhaps that was their punishment then.
Do you think that's okay?
Do you know, we're no longer in ancient Rome, so different standards apply. It's, for instance, I had this sort of argument about a week ago where someone said that Paul Gauguin was a paedophile, he was an artist because he went to Tahiti and he slept with a 14-year-old. And in that society at the time, that was still frowned upon, but it was actually perfectly legal. And so ultimately, can we impose our moral understanding and our legal obligations upon a different time period? We really can't. And so in that sentiment, I speak about the gladiators as well. I can't impose my present belief because it doesn't fit in the time.
It's in the past.
Absolutely.
Maybe a more contemporary example like torture. Whilst you've got people that are pro-torture, they'd say that, look, we're saving so many lives. This person, like you say, is diseased in the head. Or let's just say we take it one step forward and we say, if we were to torture this individual's daughter, yeah, who is innocent, she hasn't done anything. However, we know this person will give up the secrets to whatever he's doing if we torture the daughter. What do you think about that conundrum? Is it okay to torture this individual's daughter to save the lives of so many others?
Under what circumstance does this happen?
A thought experiment.
A thought experiment. Perhaps it would be. Perhaps it would be. But I would never find myself in such a situation. You see, really, I root all of my understanding in the here and now and what is in front of me and what conflicts I will face. More often than not, there's so little at stake, and it's because I don't really find myself in a position of power. Perhaps for the best, considering that I don't actually have a stance on such sort of theoretical situations, which could be true for others, but not for myself. I really am a strong believer in the self, the individual, and I believe that the individual should strive to be the best version of themselves for the society that they live in. And every society will have a different version of that. The version of society I've been placed in is Western Europe, and I grew up there. I share some of the moral values. I have a sort of a foundation of religious understanding, and that guides me just as much as I require it to, or probably develop over time. But really, I believe in empowering the individual to do what is necessary for them and what they
That's interesting.
Their purpose.
Okay,
that's really where I stand.
I think you've made a good point, because I thought it was just okay. So you're saying empowering the individual. How would we go about empowering the individual, and with what?
Really, I will never impose the way that I've been brought up upon everybody else as being the right way to go about it. But I will say that
how do you decide the right way?
My parents, because they gave me the tools to allow me to navigate this world in order to make the most of the opportunities that are provided to me. And that is how I know that whatever, for all the, their faults and flaws, they did something right, because I find myself 7 years after leaving the home able to make the most of opportunities, build something, build my own vision for myself, and find my purpose and work on fulfilling my purpose. And in that sense, it was a good upbringing.
I'm sure it was. I mean, the fact that we're even standing here having a polite conversation, I mean, surely they did do a good job. But unfortunately, when it comes to the masses in general, it's unfortunate not everybody will be fortunate to have wonderful parents like yourself. And because of that, and like you've also acknowledged as well, there's that nature-nurture argument as well, which is you might be in certain situations, certain scenarios, there might be certain things happening to your family that will make you think that certain decisions are actually okay. And you may not be fortunate enough to kind of have people telling you, or even kind of having a morality that is objective. Because a lot of things, unfortunately and sadly, do come from the top down. You've got people that are more in power. They will tell us, look, the best way to object against the government is through peaceful means, and don't come to the streets, don't do this, don't do that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if we rely on ourselves, when we rely on nature and nurture, when we've got people changing history, when we've got people manipulate, I'm sure you've heard of the nudge theory as well. Noam Chomsky said manufacturing consent. So when we've got all of this happening, I would argue, Zoe, that we need an objective morality. Yes, certain people may have derived certain morals from certain aspects of religion, and that's fantastic. But for the masses, they may not be as lucky. And for them, it's important to kind of, firstly, we acknowledge that there is a being who's created us. Number two, now when we look that there's, certain religions, how do we tell the difference, or how do we kind of critique each holy book? What's the criteria? And I would argue that the criteria is, number one, the veracity of those holy books. For example, when you look at the Quran, are you familiar with the scientific method?
Not entirely.
So there's something called the falsification. So science, if done right, the aim is you come up with a hypothesis and then you prove it to be false. Yeah, and then if it's not false, then that's fine. It's a theory. You don't try to prove that it's correct. So because of the falsification theory, so there's a falsification kind of aspect in the Quran as well, where the Quran invites people that, look, it's from God. If you have an issue and you think it's not from God, firstly, bring verses like it, find a contradiction in it, find an issue with it. And of course, I'm sure you've heard the Quran is 1400 years old, and people haven't found a contradiction that's worthy of, say, being broadcast everywhere. And otherwise, the Speaker's Corner, anyone can come here and say, aha, you've made this claim, or we'd be bashed on the heads with that contradiction again and again and again and again. But that's not the case. People don't come and bash us over the head with that. The Quran, when you look at the manuscripts, when you look at preservation, because certain religions will make a claim, and then I say, look, was that the book that was revealed at the time of your founder? And they say, no, it's the things that have been passed down. And I would argue that not only do prophecies need to be present in that holy book, but prophecies that can be verified by an external source. And also, you've got the holy book. I need something empirical. I need, manuscript evidence. I need stuff in there that, like you've rightly pointed out, is morally, helpful and beneficial to my life. So I can say that Islam has all of those things. Prophecies. For example, let me posit a question. Let's just say, I'm sure you've heard of Nostradamus.
Yeah.
So Nostradamus, especially in the Western culture, he's kind of linked to the Mayans, if I'm not mistaken, or if I am. But Nostradamus, he famously said 2012, the world will come to an end. And
Yes.
And there was that. They actually did. I remember I was quite young, and I was like, because that movie came out, and there was that whole thing. There were certain cults. So apparently, because his kind of prophecies are very open to interpretation. But then, when you look at the prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, it's actually very fascinating because they're very specific, they're very particular, and they're in the Quran. In fact, one such prophecy, I'll give you an example. This is in chapter 111. This is it's a small one. It's not, and I really like it because it's small, it's very sweet. God revealed that Abu Lahab, which was an individual, he would not accept Islam. Now these guys were looking for any excuse to prove the Quran to be false. However, Abu Lahab did not accept Islam. Now think about it. If, for example, there's an individual here who's hell-bent on proving the Quran to be false, here's an opportunity. All he has to do is say, I'm Muslim. The Quran has now been proven to be false. But Abu Lahab was alive, and not only was he alive, he didn't accept Islam till his death. And a few years later, there was the conquest of Makkah, and in the conquest of Makkah, pretty much everybody accepted Islam, yeah, from that tribe. So the question arises that the author of the Quran knew that Abu Lahab would not survive till the conquest of Makkah, which again is another addition to this, that number one, look, here's an opportunity that these guys were hell-bent, he didn't take the opportunity, and number two, he passed away at just the right time. That's a very small prophecy. Another prophecy is, this was with regards to the fight between the Persians and the Byzantines. So the Byzantines were losing. Not only were they losing miserably. A plague had broken out. They lost Jerusalem, and Heraclius was literally being made a mockery of. And it was at that time that verses of the Quran were revealed that Byzantines will win within 3 to 9 years. People were thinking, hang on a minute, what's this? Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's all well and good, you know, I'll politely nod along, but this is in your scriptures, that's fair enough. But there's a non-Muslim source, which you can search up. It's called the Chronicles of Theophanes. So he was a non-Muslim who verified that this exact thing did actually take place. And that's the thing, Zoe, like, the one thing I agree with you, and this is what I like about religion, the moral aspect and all of that sort of stuff. But I've also grown to appreciate that left to our own devices, human beings can't be trusted. Reason being because human beings, I don't know if you've heard of the Stanford prison experiment, which is that in certain situations, human beings will crawl for survival. They will, it's like the Joker from The Dark Knight. You know, like, you know, these civilized people, I'm paraphrasing, I don't want to misquote the Joker, but they would eat each other given the right kind of circumstances. And I guess that's what I've seen from my experience. And hopefully you won't have to see, but from my experience, I have seen that, and that's why I did turn towards religion. But I'm sure you'll also appreciate a lot of people make a lot of categorical statements and claims. And it's always good to have something empirical that you and I, living at this time, can verify, like manuscripts, like prophecies, like the ones that I mentioned, that can be verified even by outside of the religion. But unfortunately and sadly, when it comes to other faiths, because they're so old, they rely on, you know, the message. You know, it's a nice message, it's come down, but I actually agree with you. Like, if you can't prove the veracity of a scripture, why do I have to live by it? But as Muslims, though, we can. For example, the manuscripts, the oldest manuscript of the Quran is actually dated to the time of revelation, and it's actually present now in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan. It's present in this country, University of Birmingham, and it's been carbon dated by the University of Oxford. I'm saying these things because there's cameras here. Anything that I'm saying can be verified. You can check it yourself when you go home. So that for me was very powerful. That okay, we've got manuscript evidence. Okay, the language. So the Quran, the claim made by the Muslims is this is the religion till the end of time, like for everybody. Everybody is welcome and for everyone's benefit. Okay, then surely the language of the Holy Scripture should be accessible. And if you actually look, Jesus' spoken language was Aramaic. It's not a live language anymore. Sanskrit of the Vedas, it's not a live language. Arabic of the Quran is a live language. It's the 5th most spoken language on the planet. Actually fluctuates between 4, 5, and 6. And the fact and the beauty is that the Quran, from the beginning till the end, is memorized. In fact, it's mass memorized from as young as 6. Reason why I say 6 is because this was a couple of years ago. There was a child in Palestine. They'd memorized it. And every year in Ramadan, the whole Quran is recited from beginning to end from memory. So to me, Zoe, that was like, you know what? That fulfills that criteria. That you're telling me to follow this book, okay, at least it's the same book. But when it comes to the Bible, I'm not going to delve too much into the Bible because that's...
I agree with you. It's all been mistranslated, really. My mother's still very very Protestant, and she doesn't like the translation of the Bible, and she goes to Jewish priests. What are they called? Rabbis. Because they of course they speak. They can speak the Hebrew, and they read the Hebrew versions of the Old Testament, and they are different. A sort of minuscule word mistranslations can have a great difference in meaning.
They do.
Often it's not whole sentences, it's small words that have just sort of been brushed over. And then in that sense, nuance is entirely significant, and this is sort of where the conspiracy of the Vatican comes in, because the Vatican has done a lot to protect their own selves. But, and that then has a great effect on how Christianity is read to this day. So in that sense, for all the reasons that you have sort of given evidence towards, I do really respect Islam for not only for its deep history, but also for its, if you look back further into history, and this is something that a dear historian friend of mine shed light on, it was the deep sort of, I would say, what's the word for spirituality within religion though? There was no, not quite that, but there was a sort of a deep spiritual mysticism that was very, I think it was very admirable, because it had a very sort of soulful and meaningful root to it, that for the individual almost. I don't really believe in policing society, but I agree with you. We can't really trust society. We can't leave it to everyone's hands to figure it out for themselves in a way that will be beneficial for all to live peacefully. So in that sense, it's incredibly useful to have one organism that can sort of contain
an objective morality, yeah,
and navigate and direct people. But I think it's too late for me, you see, because I've had my upbringing, for better or for worse. It's too much nurture that has gone into it. So, but I will live the rest of my life still open-minded and never inflicting what I believe upon someone else. Because, for instance, my Muslim friends, they've arrived at their own morality for their nurture, and yet we still sit in the same room and discuss things.
Yeah.
And we exchange ideas. And so in that sense, I'm looking for like-minded individuals, open, but not necessarily exactly as I am.
It actually reflects, what you're saying is actually reflected in the Quran, because God says as well, there's no compulsion within religion. So the Quran actually agrees with your point that you shouldn't enforce somebody, you shouldn't compel somebody. Reason with them and argue with them with ways that are most righteous. Again, is a quote from the Quran as well. But another thing that I wanted to kind of share with you, which kind of really stood out to me with regards to the other religions, which was they would quote sayings of their founders, but then the question would arise that how do you know? How can you verify that? And Islam has something very special called the chain of narration or chain of transmission. For example, I can quote the exact sayings of the Prophet. I can tell you who I got it from, who they got it from, who they got it from. Have you heard of anything similar with regards to another religion? A chain of transmission where every single person in that chain has a biography.
Could I say something?
Sure.
Before we sort of go really deep on this one tangent of shopping between various religions, I think we came here through an argument that God needs to be wise and make the right decision, giving agency to the necessary being.
Yes.
So we quickly skirted over the faculties of
to morality, yeah.
into morality.
Yes, yes.
And secondly, that there are no other ways to have an objective morality. Through a few individual examples, with gladiators and a few others.
Yes.
But I think two quite valid points were brought up already. Well, I think I would define it as liberalist view of agency of.
I never really know what to name it.
Having a certain liberty to decide.
Libertarianism.
But libertarianism is a later kind of. It's something that was created in an electoral system as an alliance between parties. It's not necessarily philosophy. Therefore, it's the wrong one to use.
Is it okay if I put this mic on you?
Yeah, why not? No. Liberalism is a kind of one of the backdoor put-here arrangements. More Enlightenment period, 17th, 18th century vision of liberalism is very simple. It's your liberty ends where the liberty of the other person begins. That's a lot more streamlined. It doesn't enter the realm of politics, which I think was the argument, I don't want to say fallacy, but the way that we arrived at shopping for various religions to fill that seemingly necessary void. Apologies. There are ways to create a moral system for an individual which does not apply to the larger body, to the governing body, to government, to society. Islam is quite unique in a way that Ummah is the way the community is living by the laws of the religion. It can be used in the same list as Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, but it can also be used in the same list as Western civilization, subcontinental civilization, North African civilization. It has more applications than just religion, but it doesn't need to be. In most societies and most cultures, each of those roles is served by a separate set of beliefs. As you said, an individual, the way you go about, will not necessarily concern yourself with the instruments of slavery, with the institution of slavery, or torture, or how a government gets to fulfill its objectives. And it's not unique to the Western world either. There is a certain way in Hinduism that is for the rulers, for the that's the basis of the sects. There's a different religion, different philosophy, depending on which roles, what's the magnitude of the religions that you ought to make. So by saying that a moral principle does not apply to a government or a ruler, doesn't invalidate it as a personal way of living our life. And once we look at it in that way, in this specific purpose for our moral philosophical understanding, we stop looking for something that is also an irrefutable set of laws, which Quran is.
Firstly, I want to commend you for listening, and because you've summarized it very well. I mean, and you saw exactly where we went on a tangent, and I think maybe the artist, or how we were kind of maneuvering through it, I think it was quite abstract, which is fine. But I think you're thinking more from a kind of deism to theism, and then from law sort of point of view, which we can definitely. I'd love to just kind of discuss that with you. But were you thinking similar to that, or were you thinking something different? Did he kind of reflect your sentiments, or?
Yes, I think he's heard many of them before, that's why.
Right, so you're kind of singing from the same hymn sheet, yeah? You're similar in your kind of stance?
I believe so, I believe so, but he would have far more historical grounding for his, whereas mine is basically, it's all intuition really, what feels right.
Okay, interesting. So the point that I made about a necessary being and then giving it certain characteristics, what did you think about that? Did that make sense?
Yes, I don't necessarily, not as much into the concept of spirituality or inevitability of God, but just to make it simpler for our case, let's say I believe in some sort of higher power. And from there we sort of went into that there needs to be a certain specific one and the qualities that it therefore must possess. Yes. But a very good point was brought up about theosophy, that about theosophy.
Philosophy.
Theosophy, as in Blavatnik's early 19th century pan-spiritualism. Theosophy. So that the spiritual does not need to be limited to a single doctrine, a God that is embodied in a certain text, revelation, or however it came into being or being recounted. But there is a way of looking at it, of what is universal among spiritual beliefs. That is a pluralistic point is just as valid in assessing it. And it also does not permit us to go into the fallacy of looking at ascribing it a certain axioms to that being. For instance, being wise. If I recall your point correctly, that it was intuitively appealing to you that the decisions that are made are premeditated, deliberate and right.
Yeah, but the thing with spirituality, I don't necessarily disagree with you there. I do believe that spirituality is not necessarily linked to a specific religion. So here I was talking about the validity of, I was eventually going to the validity of scripture, prophethood, and then the religion itself. Yes. So spiritualism you can get from other things. But when we couple it with morality, with a way of life, with regards to accuracy of prophecies and stuff like that, my argument was that Islam has and presents a more veracious, a more logical, a more philosophically sound.
Yes.
And that's what I was kind of.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So
That.
on that playing field,
Yes.
it's a very strong stance.
Yes.
Absolutely. But on a playing field where we are not necessarily looking for a particular dogma.
Oh, sure. When it comes to spirituality, I actually agree with you. I would say that, people of other religions can be considered spiritual as well. Even somebody, that's why, I was asking you about spirituality and what's the kind of processes that you have. For some people, it could just be sitting in the park. For some people, it could just be transcendental meditation. It's not necessarily linked to a religion. So my qualm is not necessarily by monopolizing spirituality. It's talking about, let's just say, that the concept of God, or why somebody would say no, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't exist, or he was a false messenger. So I would say no, he did exist, because we actually have evidence from non-Muslim sources that actually place him at that time. There's a grave, there's inscriptions, we have manuscript evidence. And then when it comes to that's where we kind of touched upon prophecies, and that's where we look at the prophecies and we look at can they be measured by an average individual? Is this religion accessible to an average individual? For example, that's where we look at, say, Trinity to, say, a 7-year-old, and Tawheed, which is the in the Islamic concept of one God, by a 7-year-old. Like, what makes sense? What makes it universal? And then using the inference, to the best explanation, then arriving and compounding the argument that actually, or the postulations that makes Islam more sound than, say, the other religions.
Going from granular and trying to prove
Exactly.
it one by one, down to the verses and their application and so on.
Precisely.
But equally, there is also a functional view of it, looking from bottom up and the effects it has on a certain society and how it's implemented. Which also, that is the argument of Al-Ghazali, for instance, where it's looking at, after the cataclysms of the Crusades and suffering the first defeats, looking at justifying the religion through the objective great successes that it enjoyed in its inception. That was the driving force for the first 500 years of the religion's existence, is that of course it's undeniably right. Look at the greatest ever unification. It's hardly a conquest, it's an entire community coming together. It's truly unprecedented, truly glorious. It's worthy of substantiating not merely a belief, but a society, a functional entity at large. But if we look at it continue on this functional trajectory, it also creates certain problems in history that once something starts going wrong, and we see it with Byzantines, it's not unique as much as we see it with the later Abbasids, is that if something is going wrong, clearly we are not quite following the way that the successful ones were. To replicate their achievements, the formula needs to be observed to the T. And that's
100%.
where Mama comes in and hadiths and really sticking to a very specific way of replicating that. But on a functional level, as much as on a granular you can discuss every hadith, there's a large religious community that enjoys closeness to the government, that always dictates what the laws should be eventually being codified. On the granular level, of course, they can substantiate every last syllable and word. On a functional, we see that perhaps the tendency towards fundamentalism and conservatism sometimes does not serve it to the best way, and the empires that tend to gravitate towards that viewpoint tend to come to a decline, and another more.
Sorry, what's your name?
Gracious one replaces Ivan.
Ivan. You've mentioned like a lot of fantastic points there. I commend you for mentioning Ghazali and having kind of that in your scope as well. But bear in mind, Ghazali also made the Kalam cosmological argument, which is the argument from causation as well. So he's made both.
Sure.
But like you've rightly pointed out, when you look at the functionality of something, one is, for example, we say don't judge Islam by the adherence to the faith, judge Islam by its scripture, because the adherents will always, I mean that's where we were discussing as well. That's when you've got the nafs, or the desires of the individual, which will sometimes override and make them ignore certain parts of the scripture. So here I'm not here representing Muslims or the actions of Muslims, because we can't defend Christianity, we can't defend Christians, we can't defend Muslims. There's always bad apples in every kind of religious group. But when it comes to Islam, that's why I am here to kind of...
I really hope my argument didn't come across as that.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Against those, it's on a more what benefits individual if it exists as the sort of guiding force within a society. I wouldn't nitpick at individuals and their flaws.
I would do that for you, because I mean I can see that your intention is not like that. But the thing is, because obviously other people may be watching as well, that's an important kind of distinction to make, because unfortunately people do judge the religion by its adherents, and the adherents don't always do justice. That's why, and you made a fantastic point, that when it comes to the preservation, or maybe you alluded to that, when it comes to preservation of the Quran or the Hadiths, and even the sayings of the Prophet, that's the direction we were going to go, that we have something called a chain of narration. And the distinction that can be made there is, okay, the ruler or the government is making this decision, but what they're saying is going against the textual, the text, in other words. And that's happened in the past as well, where governments have gone against the text, and they're going against the text today, and they're claiming to be the Muslim rulers. But I'm sure they are, and I'm sure. But the thing is that the beauty should be that a layman should be able to access those texts, and they should be able to see. They shouldn't rely on an individual that can be corrupted. And that's, Ivan, what I'm kind of getting to, and that's why I was focusing on the veracity of, say, the Quran, that you and I, and hopefully we'll give you a copy as well, and you know, you can go home and you can read it. And it's something that I'm confident that if a person does with an open heart, it's something that, let's just say my argumentation wasn't on point, but the thing is, and this is the spirituality that I would say is present in Islam, because not only do I believe it to be true, but I believe that it can be rationalized philosophically, empirically, academically, teleologically, whatever logically you can add. It can be done, and I can stand here and I can make that point.
Absolutely.
But then also, Ivan, sorry to interrupt, but also I can back it up by saying that, look, it's not dependent on my arguments. We will have a fantastic conversation, and hopefully it will continue. But also, I can also confidently say that if we give you a copy of the Quran, you guys go home, I never see you again. And somebody says, you know, that video you did with Ivan and Zoe, they accepted Islam. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. Because I genuinely believe if a person, like, I mean, I spoke to you longer, I mean, I'm sure you are as well, I'm sure you'll agree, that as long as a person's open-minded and they read the Quran without a bias, and the thing that I will say as well is, if you go home, you're just walking down the street, there's no way you could just say, hey God, or oh Allah, or whatever, yeah, and you say, look, if you are there, please guide me to the right path, or make the truth evident and clear to me that I can benefit from it.
Absolutely.
So the beauty of that is I am confident that I wouldn't need to follow you up, take your phone number, or poke you on Facebook, or what's the new social media they've got now, Threads. I wouldn't need to kind of follow you on there to do that. And that's, I guess, the spirituality that I'm more concerned about. The spirituality that gives a person peace, and there's loads of ways that a person can attain peace. But my argument is that if God has created us, and there's one God, and He has sent messengers, and I do believe that messages have been sent, but we believe the final messenger is Prophet Muhammad. We do not wipe out the previous messengers and say, no, only Islam is started 1400 years ago. No. We don't believe spirituality or Islam or the truth just emerged 1400 years ago. It's preposterous. We believe it was there from the beginning of time. There were, approximately 124,000 prophets that came, and they came with different laws. And we as Muslims believe that they called towards God, and they were also Muslims. Yeah, that's the definition. Absolutely. And we believe Moses, Jesus, all these people, called to the oneness of God. There was spirituality, there was truth to their scriptures, but like we kind of touched upon, that the scriptures were changed. And because
I recognize and I commend your ability to defend certain scriptures and details of this particular version of a religious, talk by a religious way, and I would, you'd be the first person I'd come to if out of all the plethora of spiritual pathways, out of pluralism, out of all the other ones we acknowledged, if I come to a place where I want to search for a specific religious code, and perhaps I arrive at that, perhaps I choose other ways.
Of course.
But I think that's when this conversation is most correct. I don't think I see far too many other options of exploring spirituality, individual morality, greater governance, explaining the necessary being. But you know, I do not make exceptions, and I'm sure I'll come to you to have that conversation.
And Ivan, that again, it's like you guys, you're making such fantastic points, because Islam echoes your sentiment. The declaration of faith is La ilaha, which means there is no God. So it starts first with a negation. That first, there is nothing, but Allah, but God, So in other words, Islam welcomes this. Yes. I don't feel compelled to make you convert right now or enforce my thing, because the scripture tells us, and that's the beauty, that anyone, I can hand you that scripture without blotting certain bits out or anything. You can take it and you can go, hang on, what he said, this goes against what he said. And you can come to me the following week and say, look, this goes against you. And that's the, I guess, the beauty, that you're actually encouraged to look, and not just look at, only one way and then, come up with a conclusion and not do your research. Of course, by all means, do your research. But as somebody that has done his research, I'm just sharing kind of my conclusion, and hopefully when you're on your path, you can be like, I remember that handsome bearded fellow in the park. He made these points, and you know what? He explained it in a way that, it's actually clearer than what we're seeing here. Maybe we'll pay him another visit, or maybe we'll read the Quran that he gave, and check this, because to be honest, you're 100% right. There are loads of different arguments, but there's but the contingency argument, when it comes to a philosophical kind of beginning to your kind of quest, it's a strong way to start. And then from deism to theism, it makes sense that a creator that has created, and that you've got contingent things depending upon, it's not befitting of him to just create and just be detached from everything.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for
that.
My
pleasure. My pleasure.
Really wonderful to have a conversation with you.
My pleasure. Pleasure. Zoe, was there anything you wanted to say? Because we.
Oh no. Thank you for joining, because I know that this chap is certainly so much more informed about it.
Yes.
But for myself, really, I think my closing statement would always be, you see, I don't believe I'll ever really submit to one religion, and it's because I had a look at I don't think I enjoy how this world interprets religion. I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy.
I think that's the key point.
And that right there is the only reason why I'll never really join.
I wouldn't say,
I have my own individual understanding of everything. Always, that will always be my.
I'd say, and that's fine. Have your own understanding, Zoe. Definitely, but I would say just tweak your statement a little bit. Don't say never. Never say never.
Perhaps that.
Yeah, yes. Leave it open. Let's just say if the truth was to come, or something was to resonate with you on your wavelength, so be it. But never say never, because maybe I wasn't able to speak on your wavelength, maybe somebody else might be able to speak on that wavelength, and you never know. Sometimes it's at a certain juncture in your life, you're more receptive, or something opens up. Because for us to say that, never, like the way I am now, like somebody made a good point. They said that in any juncture that we're in life, we think, you know what, now I know. What I knew 3 years ago, I was wrong. Now what I know is correct. Then 3 years go forward, you know what, I was a bit off then. Now is correct. So always leave that door open, and just be open, just like you're here today, you're discussing, and we had a fine discussion, and you're welcome. The Qur'ans are there. If you want to take one, you're more than welcome to take one. If you have a copy, you want to check it online, that's free, by the way. Again, the choice is yours, and thank you for a lovely conversation.
Thank you.
There you go.
You know what? I think this promotion is qualified since you have a bag.
guess.
Thank you
very much.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
You got anything you want to say at the end?
Sorry?
You got anything you want to like say at the end?
No, alhamdulillah. Whoa, I didn't even clock these. Assalamu alaikum, brother. How are you? Assalamu alaikum.
Man, you good, brother. From Birmingham, I see some of your videos, brother.
MashaAllah.
Keep going, bro. Keep doing the dawah, bro. You know what?
Bangladeshi is here?
Yeah.
Bala Sunni.
I'm from London, by the way. You're from? London. Oh, mashallah. Okay. East London, that's Bangladesh? Yeah. Big shop. This is a bit close by. My uncle is from Luton, bro. Luton? Yeah, from Birmingham. I'm from Birmingham. I don't know his brothers, but we're all brothers, bro. You know, where's the brother Ali Dawa? He's there. Is that right? Where? He's there. You find him. Keep doing on you, I think, man. You know, it's good, man. You gotta spread the hug, brother.